Yo, what's going on? It is X's and O's with Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, courtesy of the Minnesota Lottery. I'm Paul Allen. The aforementioned KOC is with us on KFAN, the Minnesota Vikings radio network, and Vikings.com. Vikings and Green Bay Packers Sunday, U.S. Bank Stadium, 3:25 pregame on KFAN 1:30. Network affiliates pick it up at 2:30. And let's begin with the Kevin O'Connell for Green Bay. Matt LaFleur, how well do you know him?
I know him well. Obviously, we have not coached together, but I've followed him at a couple spots. He was in Washington as the quarterback coach a few years before I got there, and then he was in L.A. as the coordinator before moving on to Tennessee and eventually becoming the head coach for the Packers. So over the years, just our mutual, very good friendships with Sean McVay and being able to share some stories about working for him, both mostly the good and some of the things that we keep between us about old Coach McVay. But
right.
I got a lot of respect for him, what he's been able to do there with that team, and obviously, you know, who he's got playing quarterback for him. They've built something that's going to be a heck of a challenge for us, but we're excited about the opportunity.
So now for Green Bay with this regular season game one, it's their first game without Aaron's bailout guy, Devontae Adams, one of the very best wide receivers in the NFL. So do you expect things to be more closer to the vest, or like how do you think they're going to handle that initially?
Well, I think their confidence in Aaron allows them to maybe bring some of those wideouts along, the younger guys that, you know, we evaluated a lot of those players in the draft, whether it's Dobbs, obviously the kid from North Dakota State. You know, we felt really good about those guys on our board, so I'm sure they felt the same way. I have a lot of respect for those guys. And then, you know, the Cobbs and Lazards, and we'll see if they have Tanyan or not. But he's got plenty of weapons. I think they've got two really good running backs that affect the game, and, obviously when they hand it to them, but both those guys can affect the game in the pass game, screen game as well. And when you got a guy like Aaron playing quarterback, he's gonna stress you, understanding that, you know, wherever the weakness and voids and coverages are, there's a good chance he's going to find them. Now we've got to try to get pressure on him. We got to turn Z and Daniil loose and our interior guys, and then we feel really, really good about how we've kind of adapted to our coverage philosophy under Ed Donatel. So it'll be a huge test for us, like I said, but we're not going into this game lacking any confidence, I can tell you that much.
And Kevin, speaking of running backs, you have one of the very best overall backs in the game, at least. Yeah. I mean, you know more about it than I'll ever know, but at least off what I've seen, running, burst, catching, pass protection, and really, really caring, which is kind of an underrated fourth facet. With Dalvin Cook, what of his skill set do you find yourself really admiring?
Well, I think the thing that jumps out is you've kind of known about him for years in this league, either coaching against him or just, you know, being a fan of his game since he's been a Minnesota Viking. But when you actually get here and you watch him start to really submerge himself into how we run the football, you know, there's a lot to be said of the physical skill set of backs, and he's got as elite of a skill set, in my opinion, running the football as anybody in this league. But it's the things that you don't talk about a lot, the vision, how to set up blocks, how to understand, you know, we might be calling a run at this area of the front, but really we all know that he's going to set that thing front side, and then that ball could come ripping back right off of a couple double teams. And it's all the illusion of doing a lot of different things, but ultimately we're trying to let linemen settle in and hit a lot of blocks the same way, you know, be able to work together in combinations. And then that's what I think Dalvin does best, is he reads those combinations and finds the weakness in that front. And then I'm glad you mentioned him as just a pass catcher. I mean, we've got to find ways to get the ball in his hands, not only on first and second down, but on third down, because if people are going to have a plan for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Irv Smith, a lot of times, you know, they should pay more attention to our running backs, but if we can get them out into the progression and get 5 eligibles coming alive for us, Kirk Cousins will be able to find somebody winning those one-on-one matchups.
What is your wife like during games, and will it intensify now that husband and dad is head coach, and it's at home, and it's loud, and it's the border rival? What's she like?
I've been told she's pretty calm.
Oh, good.
You know, I've been told, I think it'll probably ramp up a little bit for her. But, my oldest son, Caden's the one I got to worry about. He knows the game as well as any 7-year-old I know. And he'll have, we could win this game by 20, and he's still going to have 4 or 5 play calls. He's going to be like, Dad, what were you guys trying to do right there?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So I think I'll be prepared for a lot of critics out there just by the one that lives in one of the rooms in our house. So
that's terrific. Kevin O'Connell, X's and O's, courtesy of the Minnesota Lottery on KFAN, the Vikings Radio Network, and Vikings.com. And with former Packers, people will think Zadarius Smith and Chandon Sullivan, but Mike Smith, Kevin's pass rush coordinator and outside linebackers coach, very, very well respected in league circles. And having watched him, some during OTAs and more during training camp, it's clear that he's very, very comfortable and good and resonates with this generation of player. And what traits does he possess where he really, like with Rashawn Gary, I mean, I'm not going to say Rashawn turned his whole career around because of Mike, but Mike, from what I understand, had a big hand in it. And that can be difficult at times. What are some traits he possesses, Kevin, that help him in situations like that?
Well, first and foremost, there's an art to rushing the passer. A lot of people just see the end product, the quarterback going on the ground. But if you're just purely talking rushing the passer, the technique, angles, sets of offensive linemen, how you want to attack certain guys over other guys in different ways, there's nobody better, in my opinion, of coaching those things and in this league as far as maximizing the guys that we have. And we feel really strongly about our group. I think we go 4 deep with some really talented rushers. Obviously, everybody knows about Z and Daniil, and we're expecting to turn those guys loose. But, Pat Jones and DJ Wanham, the camps that they've had, the impact they did have, in getting to play quite a bit in the preseason. I feel like we've got really good depth there, and turning Mike Smith with those guys and turning that group loose now that it's real football will be exciting. And then the other thing is Mike connects with players. I mean, every different background, guys that grew up in different parts of the country, different, athletic backgrounds. He can tap in to those things and pull out greatness within a player. And it's unique how he does it. I will tell you, it's unique, his relationships with those guys. You could be walking by that outside linebacker room some days, and who knows what you're going to hear. But I can tell you when they hit the grass and those guys are all in, it's been fun to watch their development. Really excited about that group.
The 2020 National Football League draft is widely considered to be the deepest and or best wide receiver draft in the history of the NFL. And Kevin and the Vikings have 3 of them now with the JJ, KJ, and Jalen Rhaegar. So with the former Eagle, who wears number 5, and this first game, certainly not, I'll never ask you to make predictions or share scheme or your game plan, but the talent and or speed he has that led him to be drafted where he was, clearly it's there.
Yep.
So, how can Rhaegar help you win games as you look forward to the totality of the season?
Yeah, I think everything we do really works off of the fact that I feel really good about our top 3 receivers. Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, you don't really want to get into the argument of who the best receiver in football is, but if he's not right up on that ballot right near the top, I'd be really, really surprised. And that's even if you ask some of those other guys around the league. Adam Thielen's had a great camp. I have so much respect for what he can bring to our offense, that comfort zone that Kirk has with him, that trust. There's a lot of reps logs between the 2 of those guys. And then KJ, it's been documented, but the camp he's had, the shape he's in right now to handle a lot of snaps. We're going to be in 11 personnel. People know that. But ultimately how those 3 guys can really play off one another, and then really how Adam and KJ complement Justin when he starts to dictate coverage. Where I see Jalen fitting into that is right in the mix with those guys. Those guys cannot play every single snap of a 17-game plus season. So we've got to find ways to activate what he does really well. And I can tell you, PA, since we got him in, This guy's all in. He's excited to be a Minnesota Viking. He loves being in that receiver room with Keenan McCardell and that group of wideouts that we just talked about. And I just feel like this provides him a real platform to, as I told him the first day he was in my office, we've got a lot of confidence in you as a player. I know you have confidence in yourself. Just get in, learn what we do, learn how we play, and then allow us to kind of, place you in different positions. Just do what you do best. And I think we'll be in good shape.
But Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong here. With Jalen, catch the punt. Let's if he is your punt returner, catch the punt.
Catch the punt.
Let's make
sure.
good. Not inside the 10. Heels on the 10. Stood the test of time. And let's start there. I mean, he had a punt return touchdown in 2020 with Philly, and he had a couple with Texas Christian University. But if he is your full-time punt returner, are you in any way surprised that he was available even via trade? Because, I mean, good punt returners are hard to find.
They are, and especially former first-round pick receivers. Now, looking at the roster of who we traded with, you add a marquee player in free agency, back-to-back years. They took a first-round pick receiver the very next season. So you look at how they've built their offense, and we're going to have our hands full with those guys week 2. You never want to say that, for whatever reason he was expendable, because looking at his role in that offense, we clearly had to trade with him to get him. We couldn't just expect to get him for nothing. So what I would say is, I just think that his role with us and his fit with us, and when we were able to get him, I give Kwesi and their staff and his staff a lot of credit for being able to find a player like that with that kind of skill set. I did a ton of work on him in the draft coming out so that I could feel really, really good about it. And then just that collaboration between Kwesi and myself to ultimately get it done in the end and make sure our roster was exactly where we wanted it coming out of training camp.
How long have you worked on this game plan? I mean, do you guys start tinkering at it in the summer, and then now it's here and you refine it? How's that work?
Yeah, we were really, coming out of the spring, we really wanted to make sure we continued to teach our offense and not really focus on an opponent early on in training camp. We saw the Niners come in, which were a completely different structure defense than what we'll see against the Packers. But really, there's good news and bad news. Good news is we hired Ed Donatel in a scheme that we'll see a lot this season from a lot of our opponents, because it's become a very popular scheme to run defensively in the league. The bad news is, we've been, playing against the same group for a month now, and we've kind of learned, as coaches told me the other day, just remember something. I know you don't love that play now, but it took our defense about 10 days to figure out how to stop it. The Packers may not have that luxury in 4 quarters of football on Sunday. So you go back and forth. You could talk yourself in and out of a lot of things. What I'd say is we've really, over the last 2 weeks, really honed in on, really figuring out exactly how we want to deploy our personnel and figure out the ways we want to attack on first and second down versus the third down snaps, and then obviously in the red zone to try to go score. Now we're in that mode where we're just really, what I'm challenging our coaches to do is we need to take some plays out, if anything. We're carrying a ton of plays, and we want to make sure by the time we hit the grass for practice this week and as we progress along throughout this week, that we're practicing the things that we're going to call in the game. So you always fight that battle. It didn't help that I gave the coaches a couple days off last weekend, and they came back in Monday morning with a whole new game plan. A whole new game plan for me. Working kind of on my own. It's amazing what you can do when you get a little free time when these coaches can't be coming in and bugging you.
Yeah, I know Rams coach Sean McVay is your mentor, and he's on a trajectory, in my opinion, to go to the Hall of Fame. I have nothing but reverence and respect for Sean, and I always have. Will you talk to him this week up to your game? I know he plays Thursday, but will you chat with him? Do you fully expect not a text, a call, or something from your mentor? Yeah,
we talked, this past weekend for a little bit, just checking in kind of post-training camp and kind of seeing where they're at. And they were kind of right in the midst of the early part of their week. So getting a chance to catch up with him and just hear, how Matthew's doing and hear how the offense has been and how much of a problem Aaron Donald is in practice still. Breaking news there.
Yeah.
But ultimately we'll talk. Him and I will talk probably once more before Sunday. They'll get through their game, with the Bills. And then obviously they'll have some free time to be able to critique every one of my play calls, probably.
Darisaw and O'Neal, your bookending offensive tackles. How do you feel about those bookenders, and specifically against Preston and Rashawn Gary? You know, obviously more goes into it in the ultimate team game, but just those matchups, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, we feel obviously that those guys, both of them, Preston and Rashawn, they're a real challenge. Over a 4-quarter game, you've got to make sure that you have a plan and you account for those guys, because whether it was when we were in LA playing against them or, just watching the tape from previous years, they can be a problem. And anytime you have that much respect for players, you build a plan that accounts for that. But at the same time, as I've told Christian and Brian, we're going to have some snaps where we expect you guys to be able to handle those guys and trust that within the rhythm and timing of the play, if we're doing our job as coaches, we'll be able to obviously push the ball down the field behind the strength of our offensive line, which are those tackles, and it just so happens to marry up with the strength of how the Packers want to rush the quarterback. Now, right. Kenny Clark on the inside is also, in my opinion, one of the better interior D linemen in football. Got to have a plan for their whole group, really. But the way I look at it is, we're going to challenge our guys as well. It's not always going to be the same type of challenge. We're going to move the hard down around when we can, but ultimately, when push comes to shove, we're going to need those guys to do what they've done most of training camp, which is be really, really consistent in their craft.
Yeah, it seems from afar also, Kevin, with Kenny Clark, and I've felt Dean Lowry is one of the underrated players in the NFL
absolutely.
for many years. And, Kenny's backup, TJ Slayton, not many have heard of him. He's tough as nails.
Yep.
And they got the Quay Walker kid, so clearly they're trying to beef up and get tough inside there. And speaking of tough, it's when I say running quarterbacks, okay, I think we're just first to come to mind, Mike Vick, Fran Tarkenton, players like that. So I would never call Aaron Rodgers a running quarterback.
No.
But how much stress does he put on defenses, or anxiety does he give people when he breaks the pocket?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, because you don't really always think of him like that. But when you really look at over the course of his what's become absolutely a Hall of Fame type of career, those plays where he breaks contain, and he's got such good field vision that he sees all 22. He understands when somebody gets behind the defense, and he obviously has the physical skill set to then launch the ball as far as he needs to throw it over your heads. But at the same time, his ability to attack, with his eyes up, remain a passer while also being a threat to run the ball, that stresses your defense. It stresses your linebackers to kind of maintain their role within the coverage, while also understanding if we don't get up and get a hat on him, he's going to go run for first down after first down. So I think you got to contain him. I think you got to try to keep him in there. We'll have a rush plan to try to do that. And ultimately, when he does break contain, that's when our defense in the back end, those coverage sacks, as you call them, sometimes on your call, PA, hopefully we get a few of those when we're covering up those guys down the field and getting after Aaron.
Kevin O'Connell, X's and O's, deep stretch. Offensive coordinator Wes Phillips and quarterbacks coach Chris O'Hara. And you guys come from the champion Rams.
Yep.
When you're around each other in such high leverage situations like you guys have been, do you begin to think like each other? So it's like you're thinking of something, then Wes cuts you off in the middle and he finishes the sentence, and then like O'Hara or whatever, do you begin to think like each other?
There's been countless examples of that, either when Wes has, maybe scripted some parts of practice and I see some of the things he's done and I'm like, ooh, that's a really good one right there.
Awesome.
It's been weeks since I thought of something like that. And so from that standpoint, Wes is the perfect guy in this role for me to be able to, he takes a lot off my plate, but also, there's some trust there with him to understand he's going to make me a better coach by just being around each other every day. And then Chris O'Hara, being around him for years now, his detail at which he approaches coaching the quarterback position, his ability to connect with Kirk and the rest of our quarterbacks and really kind of take a lot of the messaging from me to them. And then obviously, I can't help myself. I end up in there from time to time, probably talking way too much and bugging Chris. But it's a great point you bring up about having that kind of camaraderie with those two guys and how it can help us be the best possible staff we can be.
Last one, Coach. We have about a minute left, and thank you very much for doing this, not only today, but during the course of the season. What for you, and maybe you haven't thought of this, maybe you've thought about it a lot, but I do believe it's something that will hit you right in front of the game. staying calm
Yeah.
on the sideline, not just you, but keeping your whole thing organized. And I know from Ryan Cordell, I mean, I know you have people who are designed to do certain things.
Yep.
But the staying calm and keeping things organized, is that something on which you'll focus?
Yeah, I don't, I don't worry so much about keeping things organized as much as I do the staying calm part, because I know people sometimes look at me and they say, hey, does he ever get excited? Does he ever, lose his mind? The answer is yes. And you can just ask our coaches, even during preseason games, late in games, I tended to, go the other way sometimes. But I think the important thing to make note of for me is just making sure that, in that play calling role, I'm relying on, guys like Ryan Cordell. Mike Pettin's been huge for me, even on a daily basis, having a former head coach at one office over that I can bounce things off of. He generates a lot of original thought on opponents, on game plans, on situational football. That's just helped us be better as a staff and helped me be better as a head coach. So ultimately, I'm sure, the adrenaline, I'd be lying to you if I said I won't have butterflies and the adrenaline won't be going. But there's so much going on and so much detail to each and every snap, really in all three phases. It can get away from me if you just don't focus on doing your job, which happens to be a lot for me, but I'm excited about it.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, PA.